Jesus was in Jerusalem in the temple courts where a group of people had gathered to hear his teaching. And some religious men who were opposed to Jesus, they came up with a plan to shame him publicly. These men regarded themselves as decent, law-abiding and respectable citizens. And they sent some of their number to prowl around and look inside houses. And they looked through the windows of one house and they caught an unmarried couple together. They entered that house, they grabbed the woman, they dragged her through the streets right up to Jesus. And they publicly accused her of committing adultery. And they have witnesses. They've each picked up a stone to throw at the woman, and they claim to be obeying the Jewish law. It's really a trap for Jesus. If he joins them, then he gets into trouble with the Romans, who claim to have a monopoly on putting lawbreakers to death. But if he doesn't join them, then they will accuse him of not upholding the law. They don't care about the woman. She can be used and disposed of. She's useful for their agenda to trap Jesus. Nor do they really care about justice. The man is equally as guilty. The incident occurred after a Jewish feast in the temple grounds in Jerusalem. It was the Feast of Tabernacles, and it was attended only by men. They were celebrating their ancestors' wanderings in the wilderness. They'd lived in tents there, and they lived in tents here at the feast. And they offered sacrifices, including grain offerings, and since it was right after the harvest. Now the men came out of tradition. Some came out of duty, some came for a holiday, and others came for lesser opportunities without their wives. And Jesus came too, and he stayed on the Mount of Olives. Well, the morning after the feast, Jesus went back to the temple courts, and he sat down. A crowd of people gathered round him, and he began to teach them. He's being observed by the temple officials, who have not granted him authorization to be there. He is commanding the attention of common people whom they control, right on their territory. Jealousy and hatred grow in their hearts, and they plan a trap for him. Their plan is to catch a couple in the act of adultery. Immediately after a feast for men only, it's an ideal opportunity. This is an offence in the law of Moses, and its penalty is stoning to death. If they drag the offending lady before Jesus in public and ask for his verdict, he will be bound to uphold the law and agree to the stoning. But if he doesn't, then he is a lawbreaker. And if he does agree, they'll tell the Romans about it and get him into a lot of trouble. They have a law forbidding Jews from stoning anyone to death. Either way, they'll get Jesus in trouble, he'll lose his credibility, and he'll ruin his popularity. With their plan agreed on, they go about their business. They burst into the room, they grab the woman, and they let the offending man go. They are hypocrites. The man is just as guilty as they are. More so, it was his initiative. They arrest her and they drag her outside. Religious men surround her, and men filled with hatred and judgments, and she's reduced to an object for some murderous plot as she's dragged through those dusty roads. And she hears the name of Jesus on their lips. They hate him. They arrive at the temple courts and they stop. The woman is terrified, publicly humiliated, mere bait for the trap they've set to catch Jesus. With all respectability gone, she goes on trial, caught in the act, arrested, accused with witnesses. A mob of religious lawmen quoting the book of Moses. Guilty, obviously. There's no one to defend her case. And who is the judge? Well, it's Jesus, the most upright man alive. The verdict must be guilty. The lawmen have picked up stones, and one of them speaks for the rest. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman to death. Now what do you say? The woman has no legal defence. She's got no voice. Her mind is screaming with shame and fear. She's expecting the worst. Well, at this point of time, Jesus bends down and he starts writing on the ground with his finger. No one says a word. He sees their trap, and he also sees their guilt. Murder in their hearts, the 5th commandment. Lust in their hearts, 7th commandment. Perverting justice, 9th commandment. Coveting Jesus' influence, 10th commandment. They pester him again for his verdict. Will he compromise the law, or will he get in trouble with the Romans? Either way, his favour with the public will be over. Jesus straightens up to speak. Everyone goes quiet and they strain to hear his verdict. And calmly he opens his mouth. If any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. And he stoops down and he writes on the ground again. The law also states that only an innocent man may execute the sentence. Their consciences are pricked. Lust, anger, judgments, hatred, jealousy, pride, selective justice. Any one of these is sin. No one is qualified to throw the stone. A stone drops. Someone sneaks away. Then another. More stones drop. The older men go first. And finally the woman is left alone, staring at the sandals of Jesus. He is an innocent man, the one and only man qualified to throw stones at her. She looks up at him, and he looks at her. Woman, he says gently, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She finds her voice and speaks for the first time. No one, sir. And Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin. The woman stands up. She is clean. She is forgiven. She is free. She has no shame. Jesus has declared all this in public. And she begins to walk home upright and restored. Out of the corner of her eye, she sees some of her accusers, humiliated, cowering, exposed and murmuring. They don't bother her anymore, and they won't catch her anymore either. Her old life is left far behind her, left at the feet of Jesus. She walks into a new life, freed from her past. And just what did Jesus do with all their sins? Well, from that day on, that woman followed his movements closely. She wasn't the only one to get exposed that day. Those who made the accusations, they also got exposed. But unlike that woman, they did not turn their lives around. Instead, they carried right on with more plotting and scheming, and eventually got their man Jesus condemned by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. They demanded his crucifixion, and Pilate yielded to their pressure. Jerusalem was filled that day with people like them, shouting and accusing, and there were also people like her. They all watched as the soldiers whipped and scourged and crucified Jesus and nailed him up upon that cross, the innocent Son of God, taking the punishment due for all of their sins. They had nothing to say. Before their eyes was love paying the ultimate price. For them, he breathed his last, and they buried his body in a tomb outside the city. The sins of that woman and of all others who believed just like she did were carried in the body of Jesus that day, on his cross, fully paid for. They were buried with him, and they disappeared forever. Then on Sunday morning, Jesus reappeared, alive. That woman was among the first to meet him, and their hearts swelled with love and gratitude for what he had done for them. Well, Jesus returned to heaven, and he left them all with a duty to tell everyone that their sins also can be forgiven. Their lives can be restored, and their hearts can be filled with the love of Jesus that filled that woman's heart that day, the day she met Jesus.